The Grand Assembly Hall was the largest building ever made by living creatures. It floated in space near the center of the galaxy. Its walls were made of crystal that could change color based on the mood of those inside. Today, the walls glowed a cold blue. The mood was not friendly. 4,000 species had sent their representatives to this place. They came from every corner of known space. Some were tall and thin, like walking sticks. Others were short and round, like living stones. Some floated in tanks of liquid. Others existed as clouds of gas, held together by magnetic fields. They were all different, but today they agreed on one thing. Humanity had to go. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood alone on the speaking platform. She was 53 years old, with gray hair cut short, and eyes that had seen too much. Behind her, the empty seats of the human delegation reminded everyone that she had come alone. She had known what today would bring. The Speaker of the Assembly was a creature called Vorithax. It belonged to a species so old that they had forgotten their own homeworld. Vorithax had no face that humans could read, but its voice carried clearly through the translation systems. The vote concerns the continued membership of the species known as humanity in the Galactic Concord, Vorithax announced. The charges are as follows: civilizational incompatibility, dangerous rate of expansion, unpredictable behavior, excessive aggression, failure to follow established protocols of peaceful development. Elena listened without expression. She had read the charges many times. She knew them by heart. The human species was admitted to the Concord 200 standard years ago, Vorithax continued. In that time, they have expanded to 347 star systems. They have involved themselves in 4 regional conflicts. They have developed weapons that were not approved by the Technology Council. They have refused to share their medical advances with the Concord. They have been difficult. A sound moved through the assembly. It was not quite laughter, but it carried the same meaning. Yes, the gathered species agreed. Humans were difficult. Humans were a problem. Humans needed to be removed. Does the human representative wish to speak before the vote? Vorithax asked. Elena stepped forward. I do not wish to argue against the charges, she said. Her voice was calm. I only wish to ask a question. Why now? We have been members for 200 years. What has changed? The assembly grew quiet. No one answered. I see, Elena said. She stepped back. Please continue with the vote. The voting began. Each species had one vote, no matter how large or small their population. In reality, it meant that the oldest and most powerful species could easily convince the smaller ones to vote their way. Through threats, through bribes, through simple pressure applied over centuries. The Etherians voted first. They were the oldest species in the Concord. They abstained, as they always did on controversial matters. They preferred to watch and judge. The collective voted yes. They were a hive mind that controlled 800 star systems. They had never liked humans. Humans were too individual, too chaotic, too hard to predict. The Krellian Empire voted yes. The Vosh Federation voted yes. The Unified Territories of Marn voted yes. One by one the votes came in. Elena watched the holographic counter climb higher and higher. She showed no emotion. She simply watched and waited. Some species voted no. The Velthari, a small species that humans had helped during a plague, voted against banishment. The Ushani, who had been relocated from their homeworld generations ago, also voted no. A few others joined them, but they were too few. The final count appeared in the air above the assembly. 3,847 in favor of banishment. 12 opposed. 141 abstentions. The walls of the assembly hall shifted to a satisfied green. The vote had passed. Humanity was no longer welcome in the Galactic Concord. The motion is carried, Vorithax announced. The human species is hereby banished from all Concord space. You have 1 standard year to remove all human presence from Concord territories. Your access to the relay network will be terminated. Your trade agreements are void. Your treaties are cancelled. You will have no further contact with Concord species. Elena nodded slowly. She had expected this. She had prepared for this. But hearing the words still hurt. "Do you understand these terms?" Vorithax asked. "I understand them," Elena replied. "Do you have anything to say?" Elena was quiet for a long moment. The assembly waited. Some of the representatives were already celebrating quietly among themselves. The human problem was solved. They could return to their normal business of ruling the galaxy. "I request permission to make a brief statement," Elena said. "Not to argue, not to plead, simply to clarify a few things before we leave." Vorithax considered this. The request was unusual, but the Concord prided itself on being fair. They had won. They could afford to be generous. "Permission granted," Vorithax said. "Keep it brief." Elena looked out at the thousands of species that had just voted to cast humanity into the darkness. She looked at the Etherians, who had watched and done nothing. She looked at the small group of species who had voted to support humanity. She remembered all of it. "We accept your verdict," she said. "We will leave your space. We will honor the timeline you have given us. We will not fight this decision." A wave of surprise moved through the assembly. They had expected anger. They had expected threats. They had expected humans to be human. "However," Elena continued, "before we go, we believe it is important that you understand exactly what you have voted to remove from the Concord. We have been members for 200 years. In that time you have seen very little of what humanity truly is. This was intentional." She paused. "We request a 3-day recess to prepare transition documents. During this time, we will share some information that we believe is relevant to your future planning. Consider it a parting gift." Vorithax consulted with the senior representatives. 3 days was nothing, and they were curious despite themselves. What could humanity possibly show them that would matter? "Granted," Vorithax said. "This assembly will reconvene in 3 standard days." Elena bowed slightly. It was a human gesture of respect, though the aliens did not know this. Then she turned and walked out of the Grand Assembly Hall. Behind her, the representatives began talking among themselves. Most were pleased. The difficult species was leaving quietly. This was better than they had hoped. None of them noticed the small smile on Elena's face as the doors closed behind her. None of them understood what they had just agreed to. In 3 days, they would learn. In 3 days, everything would change. Humanity had been preparing for this moment for 200 years, and now, finally, it was time to show the galaxy what they had been hiding. The 3 days passed slowly for the Galactic Concord. Representatives spent their time making plans for a galaxy without humans. Trade routes would need to be adjusted. Border patrols would need to be increased. Some worried that humans might become pirates or raiders once they were pushed out. Others laughed at this idea. Humans were young and weak. What could they possibly do against the combined might of 4,000 species? Elena Vasquez spent those 3 days very differently. She barely slept. She spoke with Earth and the human colonies through secure channels. She coordinated with allies that no one in the Concord knew existed. And she prepared the presentation that would change everything. When the assembly reconvened, the hall was even more crowded than before. Word had spread that the humans were going to say something interesting. Representatives who normally sent assistance came in person. News networks from across the galaxy pointed their cameras at the speaking platform. Elena walked to the center of the hall. She looked tired, but calm. In her hand, she carried a small device no larger than a human finger. Thank you for granting this time, she said. What I am about to show you is not a threat. It is not a plea for mercy. It is simply the truth. What you do with this truth is your choice. She activated the device. Holographic images appeared throughout the assembly hall. Every representative could see them clearly. Every news network began broadcasting. For 200 years, you have known humanity as a minor species, Elena began. Young, aggressive, clever, but primitive. You have seen our public fleet of 12,000 ships. You have seen our 347 colonies. You have seen what we wanted you to see. The first image showed a human ship. It was the kind everyone recognized. Boxy, ugly, functional but unsophisticated. The representatives nodded to themselves. Yes, this was human technology. Nothing impressive. Then the image changed. A different ship appeared. It was sleek and fast-looking. Its design was unlike anything the Concorde had ever seen. It was clearly human in origin, but it was generations ahead of anything humans had ever shown. This is a Shadow-class cruiser, Elena said. We have 42,000 of them. They are faster than any ship in the Concorde fleet. They carry weapons that we developed in secret. They are crewed by humans who have trained for decades for a conflict we hoped would never come. The assembly went silent. You may wonder where we hid 42,000 ships, Elena continued. The answer is simple. Space is very, very big. We built our shipyards around brown dwarf stars, in asteroid fields far from any habited system, in the empty spaces between spiral arms where no one ever looks. You never found them because you never thought to look. More images appeared. Shipyards the size of small moons, factories producing weapons and armor, training facilities where human soldiers learn to fight in zero gravity, in toxic atmospheres, in conditions that would kill most species. We have also made advances in other areas, Elena said. Medicine, for example. A new set of images appeared. Charts and diagrams showing human medical research. 12 years ago, the Krellian Empire suffered an outbreak of the Weeping Plague. 14 billion Krellians died. The Concorde could not find a cure. Elena paused. We found a cure. We could have saved them. We chose not to share it. Angry shouts came from the Krellian delegation. Their representatives stood up, their scaled bodies shaking with rage. Why would you let us die? Because the Krellian Empire voted to block human expansion into the outer territories, Elena replied calmly. Because your government made secret deals with our enemies. Because we were watching, and we did not like what we saw. She let that sink in before continuing. We also solved the energy crisis that has limited faster-than-light travel for millennia. Zero-point energy extraction, unlimited power from the vacuum of space itself. We have had this technology for 80 years. We did not share it. The images changed again. They showed power generators that could fit in a human hand, but produce enough energy to run a city. They showed ships that could cross the galaxy in weeks instead of months. You wondered why we shared so little, Elena said. Why we always seemed to be hiding something. Now you know. We were hiding everything. The assembly was in chaos. Representatives shouted at each other. Some demanded that humanity be destroyed immediately. Others called for calm. The Etherians sat in perfect silence, their ancient minds processing what they were seeing. Elena raised her hand. Slowly the noise died down. I have not shown you these things to frighten you, she said. I have shown you these things so that you understand what comes next. New images appeared. These were not of ships or weapons. They were documents, communications, secret recordings. For 200 years we have been watching the Concorde, Elena said. We have seen how this galaxy truly works. We have seen the corruption, the exploitation, the secret deals made in dark rooms. The images showed Concord officials taking bribes. They showed elder species forcing younger ones to vote certain ways. They showed the true reason for humanity's banishment. It had nothing to do with aggression or unpredictability. You did not vote to banish us because you feared what we are, Elena said. You voted to banish us because you feared what we might discover. You feared that we would learn the truth about the Concord, that we would see through the lies, that we would tell others what we found. She pointed to a section of the assembly where several small delegations sat together. The Velthari were promised development aid that never came. The Yushani were relocated from their homeworld to make room for a hyperspace lane that benefits only the wealthy systems. The Kreth have been denied membership for 300 years because their resources are too valuable to share. The named species looked at each other. Some of them had suspected these things. Now, they had proof. You wanted us gone because we were starting to make friends, Elena said. The wrong kind of friends. The kind who demand answers. She turned to face Vorathax directly. You have voted to banish humanity. We accept this. We will leave. But we will not leave quietly, and we will not leave alone. The device in her hand pulsed once. The presentation ended. In 3 days I will return to this assembly. I will present humanity's terms for our departure. You are free to reject them, but before you do, I suggest you consider carefully what it means to have humanity on the outside looking in. She walked toward the exit. The representatives parted before her like water around a stone. No one tried to stop her. No one knew what to say. At the door, Elena paused and looked back. We are not your enemies, she said. We never were. But we are no longer willing to be your victims. 3 days, honored representatives. Use them wisely. Then she was gone, and the galaxy would never be the same. Panic spread through the Concord like fire through dry grass. In the 3 days after Elena's presentation, more emergency meetings were held than in the previous century combined. Military commanders gathered in secret rooms to discuss options. Politicians made desperate calls to allies. Spies worked overtime, trying to confirm what humanity had revealed. The news was not good. Human merchant ships had been quietly positioning themselves near critical infrastructure for decades. Power stations, communication relays, food distribution centers. The ships had done nothing threatening. They simply sat there, waiting. Now everyone understood what they had been waiting for. Attempts to move against these ships failed immediately. When Concord vessels approached, the human ships simply moved away. They were faster, much faster. It became clear very quickly that if humanity wanted to cause damage, no one could stop them. They just waited. When the assembly reconvened for the 3rd time, the mood had changed completely. The cold blue light was gone. The walls flickered between colors as thousands of species experienced fear, anger, and confusion all at once. Elena Vasquez walked to the speaking platform. This time, she was not alone. Behind her came representatives from 47 different species. Some were well known, like the Velthari and the Yushani. Others were species so minor that most Concord members did not even know their names. They walked together, standing with humanity, forming a wall of solidarity that no one had expected. What is this? Vorathax demanded. This is a human matter. These species have no place here. With respect, Elena replied, these species have every place here. They are our allies, our friends. They have agreed to stand with humanity, whatever comes next. Her name was Calixia, and her people had been exploited by the Concord for centuries. Their homeworld had been strip-mined to fuel the expansion of wealthier species. Their population had been reduced to a fraction of what it once was. They had been forgotten by everyone except humanity. The humans came to us 50 years ago, Calixia said. Her voice was soft, but carried through the silent hall. They did not ask for anything. They offered help, medicine, technology, protection. When we asked why, They said it was because no one else would. An Ushani representative spoke next. His people had been forcibly relocated 3 times in the last 1,000 years. Each time, it was to make room for projects that benefited the elder species. Each time they lost more of their culture, their history, their identity. Humanity helped us preserve our heritage, he said. They built archives to store our records. They funded expeditions to recover artifacts from our abandoned worlds. They treated us like we mattered. No one else did. One by one, representatives from the 47 allied species spoke. They told stories of human kindness, human generosity, human willingness to help those who had been abandoned by the rest of the galaxy. It was not the picture of humanity that the Concord had painted. When the testimonies ended, Elena stepped forward again. We did not spend 200 years preparing for war, she said. We spent them preparing for this moment. The moment when the Concord showed its true face. The moment when we could stand here, surrounded by friends, and offer a different path. She activated her device. A document appeared in holographic form, visible to every representative. These are humanity's terms, Elena said. Not for our departure, for our continued participation in a reformed Galactic Concord. This was not what they had expected. They had prepared for demands, for threats, for ultimatums. Instead, humanity was offering to stay. Term 1, Elena read. The Concord will reform its voting system. Every species will have equal representation, regardless of age, power, or wealth. No more backroom deals. No more pressure campaigns. One species, one vote, freely cast. Murmurs spread through the hall. This would destroy the power structure that the elder species had built over millennia. Term 2. All species that have been exploited, displaced, or harmed by Concord policies will receive full reparations. Homeworlds will be returned where possible. Resources will be redistributed fairly. The debts of the past will be paid. The murmurs grew louder. This would cost trillions. It would require the wealthy species to give up advantages they had held for centuries. The technologies that humanity has developed will be shared freely with all species that agree to the new charter. Medicine, energy, transportation, everything. The days of hoarding knowledge for profit are over. Now there was real noise. Some species were excited. Free technology could change everything for the smaller civilizations. But the corporations and wealthy powers who had profited from controlling technology were horrified. Term 4, Elena paused. Any species that refuses these terms may continue as before. They may leave the reformed Concord and govern themselves as they wish. We will not force anyone to join us. This surprised many. They had expected humanity to demand total submission. Instead, they were offering a choice. However, Elena continued, those who refuse should understand what waits outside our protection. We have spent 2 centuries mapping the dangers that exist in the dark spaces between stars. Things that the Concord has ignored because they were inconvenient. Things that will become everyone's problem eventually. She showed images. Strange creatures that lived in the void. Energy beings that consumed starships. Ancient machines left behind by species long dead. The galaxy was not as safe as the Concord pretended. We have been fighting these threats in secret for decades, Elena said. Protecting Concord space without asking for thanks. If you reject our terms, that protection ends. You will face these dangers alone. The assembly fell silent again. This was not a threat. It was a simple statement of fact. Humanity had been keeping them safe, and they had never known. You voted to make us outsiders, Elena said. You wanted us gone. Now you must decide if that is still what you want. You can have us as enemies, alone in the dark, with all our ships and all our technology pointed inward. Or you can have us as partners, helping to build something better than what exists today. She looked around the hall at the thousands of species watching her. We are not asking you to like us. We are not asking you to trust us. We are asking you to look at your own history and decide if you want to continue down this path. The exploitation, the corruption, the lies. Is this the galaxy you want to live in? She gestured to the allies standing behind her. 47 species have already decided. They have chosen hope over fear, change over tradition. They have chosen to believe that the galaxy can be better. Elena stepped back from the speaking platform. You have 1 week to decide. Vote however you wish, but understand that this is the last time humanity will make this offer. If you reject our terms, we will leave, and we will take our friends with us. You will never see us again until it is too late. Her allies followed. At the door, she stopped one final time. We did not come to the stars to conquer, she said. We came because we believed there was something beautiful waiting for us. We still believe that. But beauty must be fought for, defended, built through sacrifice and struggle. That is what we are offering, the chance to build something beautiful together. She left the hall. The assembly remained in stunned silence. 1 week. They had 1 week to decide the future of the galaxy. And for the first time in thousands of years, the choice was not in the hands of the powerful. It was in the hands of everyone. The week that followed was the most chaotic in Concord history. Species that had been allies for millennia suddenly found themselves on opposite sides. Old friendships broke apart. New alliances formed overnight. The careful balance of power that had held the galaxy together for thousands of years began to crack. 3 major groups emerged from the chaos. The first group was led by the Etherians. They were the oldest species in known space. They had watched civilizations rise and fall for millions of years. They believed themselves above the petty concerns of younger races. And they absolutely refused to be told what to do by humanity. We will not bow to these children, declared High Elder Synaxis. The Etherian spoke through a translation device, but its contempt was clear in any language. They have been among the stars for barely a heartbeat. Who are they to demand change from us? 3,000 ships, ancient and elegant, carrying weapons that had destroyed empires. They believed that a show of force would remind humanity of its place. They were wrong. The second group was made up of corporate species. These were civilizations that had built their entire existence around profit. They controlled trade routes. They owned the factories that produced technology. They charged whatever they wanted because no one could stop them. Humanity's offer of free technology threatened everything they had built. If humans share their advances, our entire economy collapses, said Director Mox of the Venari Trade Consortium. We cannot allow this. We must find another way. The corporate group did not build fleets. They built economic weapons instead. Plans to freeze human assets. Strategies to cut off human supply lines. Methods to make humanity so poor that they would have no choice but to surrender. The third group simply watched and waited. These were the species who had no strong feelings either way. They did not love the current system, but they feared change. They wanted to see which side would win before they chose. And then there were the 47 allied species, plus humanity, plus a growing number of others who had heard Elena's speech and seen the truth of what she said. Every day, more species quietly sent messages to the human delegation. They wanted to know more. They wanted to join. The Etherian fleet moved first. They gathered in a region called the Veiled Nebula. It was beautiful space, filled with colorful clouds of gas and newborn stars. The Etherians had claimed it as their territory thousands of years ago. They believed it would be the perfect place to teach humanity a lesson. Human ships arrived 3 days later. There were only 500 of them, facing 3,000 Etherian vessels. The Etherians felt confident. Numbers were on their side. Experience was on their side. History was on their side. The battle lasted 11 minutes. Human ships did not fight the way Concord species expected. There were no elegant formations. No formal declarations. No pauses for negotiation. The human vessels moved like a swarm of insects, fast and unpredictable. They attacked from every direction at once. Electronic warfare came first. Human systems sent out signals that blinded Etherian senses. Suddenly, the ancient ships could not see their enemies. They fired at shadows while human vessels danced around their weapons. Then came the drones. Millions of tiny machines, each no larger than a human fist. They swarmed over Etherian hulls, cutting through armor, disabling weapons, destroying engines. The Etherians had never seen anything like it. Some Etherian captains tried to retreat. They quickly discovered that human ships were faster, much faster. Human crews could survive acceleration forces that would turn most species to liquid. They caught the fleeing ships easily. When the battle ended, every single Etherian vessel was disabled. Not destroyed, disabled. Human marines boarded the ships and secured the crews. Medical teams treated the wounded. Prisoners were given food and water and comfortable places to rest. The Etherians had expected death. Instead, they received mercy. "We do not want your destruction," Elena's message told them. "We want your participation. Go home, tell your people what happened here. Tell them that humanity is not their enemy. Tell them that there is still time to choose a different path." The Etherian fleet limped home. High Elder Synaxis did not speak publicly for many days. When it finally addressed its people, its words were very different from before. "We were wrong," Synaxis admitted. "We underestimated humanity. We let our pride blind us. Perhaps it is time to listen instead of lecture." The corporate species learned their lesson differently. Their economic attacks began well. Human assets were frozen. Human trade routes were blocked. Human merchants found themselves unable to buy or sell in Concord markets. The corporations celebrated. They had found humanity's weakness. But the celebrations did not last long. It turned out that human traders had spent 2 centuries making themselves essential. They carried medicines that no one else produced. They transported food to colonies that depended on outside supplies. They provided services that kept critical systems running. Within 2 months, the corporations' own economies began to collapse. Factories shut down because they could not get raw materials. Colonies starved because food shipments stopped. Medical crises erupted because treatments were no longer available. The corporations had thought they were punishing humanity. Instead, they had punished themselves. One by one, corporate leaders sent secret messages to Elena. They wanted to negotiate. They wanted to find a compromise. They wanted the pain to stop. "There is no compromise," Elena replied. "There is only the choice we offered. Join us or leave. Those are your options." Some corporations chose to leave. They gathered their resources and retreated to distant parts of the galaxy, hoping to rebuild their empires far from human influence. Most of them would fail. The galaxy they had known was already dying. Others chose to stay. They accepted the new rules. They agreed to share their technologies and open their markets. It was painful. It cost them fortunes, but it was better than the alternative. The third group, the Watchers, finally made their decision. They had seen the Etherian fleet destroyed without a single human ship lost. They had seen the corporate powers brought to their knees. They understood now that resisting humanity was pointless. But more importantly, they had seen how humanity treated its defeated enemies. No revenge, no cruelty, no demands for submission, just a simple offer. Join us and help build something better. That was what convinced them, not the power, the mercy. Species after species announced their support for the new charter. The numbers grew every day. What had started as 47 allies became 100, then 200, then 500. The old Concord was dying. Something new was being born. And through it all, Elena Vasquez worked without rest, negotiating, planning, building the framework for a new galactic civilization. She had not slept properly in months. Her health was failing, but she refused to stop. "We are so close," she told her staff. "I can see it. A galaxy where every species has a voice, where no one is exploited, where the strong protect the weak instead of preying on them. We are so close." She would not live to see the final result. She knew this. The doctors had told her years ago that the stress would kill her eventually. But she did not care. This moment, this chance to change everything, was worth any price. And somewhere in the dark between stars, the hidden human fleet waited, ready to defend, ready to protect, ready to ensure that the galaxy Elena dreamed of would actually come to exist. The old order was falling, the new order was rising, and humanity, the young species that everyone had dismissed, stood at the center of it all. 1 year had passed since the vote to banish humanity. The Grand Assembly Hall looked different now. The old seating arrangement was gone. No more sections for powerful species at the front. No more distant corners for minor civilizations. The new seats were arranged in a great spiral, with every delegation equal in position and importance. The walls still changed color with the mood of those inside. Today they glowed a warm gold. The mood was hopeful. 4,293 species had gathered for the first meeting of the new Concord. This was more than had ever participated before. Species that had been denied membership for centuries were finally welcome. Species that had hidden from the old Concord, afraid of exploitation, came forward to join. The galaxy was bigger than anyone had realized. Elena Vasquez walked slowly to her delegation seats. She did not take a place of honor at the front. She sat in the middle of the spiral, surrounded by allies and former enemies. The Velthari sat to her left. A reformed Etherian delegation sat to her right. Ahead of her, she could see representatives from 100 species she had never met before this year. She looked tired. She looked older than her 54 years. But she was smiling. The new Speaker of the Assembly was elected, not appointed. Her name was Calixia, the Velthari who had first testified about human kindness. She rose to address the gathered civilizations. 1 year ago, this assembly voted to banish humanity from the stars, Calixia said. Her voice was stronger now than it had been. Leading a revolution had changed her. Today we gather to build something new, something better, something that honors the sacrifice of all those who came before us. Elena listened with tears in her eyes. She had worked so hard for this moment. And now, finally, it was happening. The new Concord is not a gift from humanity to the galaxy, Calixia continued. It is a partnership, a promise, a commitment from every species here that we will do better than those who came before us, that we will protect the weak, that we will share our knowledge, that we will face the darkness together. The assembly responded with sounds of agreement in 1,000 different languages. The translation systems struggled to keep up. We have much work ahead of us, Calixia said. Reparations must be paid. Displaced peoples must be helped to return home. Technologies must be shared. Old wounds must be healed. This will take years, decades, perhaps centuries, but we begin today. She called for the vote on the new charter. It was a formality at this point. Everyone knew it would pass. But the ceremony mattered. Every species needed to make their choice publicly, in front of the entire galaxy. Unlike the old system, there were no shortcuts. Every delegation spoke before casting their vote. They explained why they were joining. They made promises about how they would contribute. Some apologized for past actions. Others expressed hope for the future. When the final count appeared, the hall fell silent. 4,293 in favor, 0 opposed, 0 abstentions. For the first time in galactic history, every species present had agreed on something. The walls of the assembly hall shifted through colors that had no names in any language. They were trying to express an emotion that had never existed before. The joy of true unity. Calixia turned to Elena. "Ambassador Vasquez," she said, "would you like to say a few words?" Elena stood slowly. Her body ached. Her doctors had warned her not to make this trip. But she would not have missed this for anything. "When I was a young woman," Elena began, "I read stories about the stars. I dreamed of the wonders we would find, the friends we would make, the adventures we would have. Then I grew up and learned that the universe was not so kind, that the galaxy was full of cruelty and exploitation, that the powerful took what they wanted and the weak suffered in silence." She paused to catch her breath. The hall waited. "I almost gave up hope," she continued. "Many times I almost gave up. But then I met the Velthari, the Ushani, the Kreth, all the species that the old Concord had forgotten. I saw their courage, their kindness, their refusal to become as cruel as those who had hurt them. And I realized something important." She looked around the hall at the thousands of faces watching her. "The galaxy is not cruel," she said. "People are sometimes cruel, systems are sometimes cruel, but the galaxy itself is just a canvas. What we paint on it is our choice. For too long, we painted pictures of exploitation and fear. Today, we begin a new painting, one of hope, one of partnership, one of beauty." She smiled at Calixia. "I am old," Elena said. "I will not see how this painting turns out. But you will, all of you will, and I ask only one thing of you. When you face difficult choices, when you are tempted to take the easy path of cruelty, remember this moment. Remember what it felt like to stand together. Remember that you chose hope." She sat back down. The hall erupted in applause that lasted for several minutes. After the ceremony there was a celebration. Species that had been enemies for millennia shared food and drink. Old grudges were set aside, at least for one night. Music played in dozens of different styles at once, somehow forming a harmony that should have been impossible. Elena did not stay long. Her assistant helped her back to the human delegation's quarters. On the way, she passed an observation window. Outside she could see the stars, billions of them, trillions, more than anyone could ever count. "Ma'am," her assistant said, "are you all right?" Elena nodded slowly. "I'm just looking," she said. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" "Yes, ma'am, it is." They stood there together for a moment, watching the stars. Far away, in the dark spaces between galaxies, the human fleet began standing down. Ships that had been ready for war for decades started returning to their hidden bases. Weapons were powered down. Crews were given leave to visit families they had not seen in years. The fleet was not disbanded. There would always be dangers in the universe, but its purpose had changed. It was no longer preparing to fight the Concord. It was preparing to protect it. Elena Vasquez died 3 months later. She passed peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by friends from a dozen different species. The new Concord declared a day of mourning. Every system, every station, every ship lowered their flags to honor the woman who had changed everything. But in the human colonies, they did not mourn. They celebrated. They told stories about the ambassador who had stood alone before 4,000 species and refused to back down, who had built an alliance from nothing, who had offered mercy when she could have demanded revenge. In schools across human space, children learned her words. The galaxy is just a canvas. What we paint on it is our choice. And in the Grand Assembly Hall, now filled with more species than ever before, a small memorial was placed near the seat where Elena had sat during the founding vote. It showed her face, captured in a moment of hope. Beneath it were words in every language known to the Concord. She believed we could be better. She was right. The new Concord was not perfect. Nothing built by living beings ever is. There were disagreements. There were setbacks. There were moments when it seemed like the old ways might return. But whenever those moments came, someone would remember. Someone would speak up. Someone would remind the others of what they had promised. And the galaxy kept moving forward, into the light, together. This is how humanity saved the galaxy. Not through conquest, not through fear, but through patience, preparation, and the stubborn belief that beings could change, that the future could be better than the past, that hope was worth fighting for. The vote to banish Earth had passed, and then humanity made their terms clear. The galaxy was never the same again.